I'll call this meeting in order on April 12th at 4:07 p.m. Could we please rise for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mary Jordan,
I'm here.
Barbara Liberty,
Here.
David McCarthy, Roe Newcomb,
Here.
Brendan Woolley,
Here.
Paul White, Lori is absent, and Chris Parker, who put absent for now, shows up.
All right, we received the minutes from the last meeting via email, and a copy was left for Paul and Chris. And has anybody got any errors or omissions on the minutes that were presented? Hearing none, can I have a motion, we move to accept them? Second it? Moved by Dave and seconded by Bob. All in favor? Minutes have been accepted. Any public comments from Phil tonight?
Have the market cornered, do I? I have a question. And it's due to too many sources of information coming from too many different directions, I think. But I'll ask it. And that is the process that this board expects with an ordinance like this one we're finalizing at this time.
Right.
What do you see as the path for that ordinance to travel through all the different folks that have to look at it and review it?
Well, I think, based on the direction, that the petition that was signed and presented to the Board of Selectmen last October directed the chairman of this Board of Selectmen to appoint a committee to review the existing comprehensive plan and all of the land use ordinances and make any corrections where needed based on public input, present those changes back to the Board of Selectmen to be put on an article in the warrant. Little did I know at that time that you'd have to have a public hearing before the town vote, so after we presented to the selectmen, they'll come up with a date for a public hearing.
Yeah.
And then we may have to make some revisions before or after that public hearing, depending on what we get out of the public hearing. I kind of took it one step further a couple weeks ago when I asked this committee for a recommendation to go to the planning board to ask for any feedback from them on possible corrections, additions to this ordinance. I have received them from two. Andrew Plummer came to the meeting last week and gave us some input. Bev, I'm sorry, right, Bev?
Yeah.
Bev gave us some input in writing per our request, and we went through Desiree for that. And we're sticking around after this meeting tonight for a short time to meet with the planning board to get some face-to-face comments from them so that we can, in our next meeting, maybe talk about some of their proposed changes. At that time, when we finalize this, we'll be presenting the final copy to the Board of Selectmen to take to a public hearing.
Are you saying it would go to the planning board for their review, so to speak, back to you, and then to the select board?
I was not planning on having the planning board actually get the ordinance and beating it up or not beating it up and coming and making changes and bringing it back to this committee for us to go over again. I don't think that's in the mix for the planning board to do, but does anybody see that differently?
No, not at all. I see pretty much what you said.
Right.
It's the same way I see it.
But I did not want to, as a chairman of this committee, totally ignore our planning board and any thoughts they have, because they do this all the time, so I wanted to be able to go to them and get feedback from them to help us implement this ordinance
Okay.
before we presented it to the board. Is that
I couldn't agree more with that. The more open, the better, and the more inputs, the better.
right? It's a public meeting. We're here to do the best we can for the town, and I thought that it would be, and just like this, these meetings are open for anybody, including the rest of the board of selectmen to come, or individual planning board members like Andrew Plummer did last week, and give us input too.
Yep.
And we've gotten some input from citizens within the community, to move it forward.
Do you think at this point, there's a possibility it can be this ordinance in particular, not the entire review process, but this ordinance can be ready for town meeting?
I don't see why not.
It's pretty close.
I've read over the revisions from last meeting that have been implemented into this, and there were 12 of them. And I think it's a pretty good revision of this ordinance. Is it perfect? I don't know that you're ever gonna have the perfect one.
You don't get perfect ordinances. That's why the review process is live.
And as the attorney pointed out, we can always come back next year to the town meeting or a special town meeting and do additional revisions where needed, if we need to. But I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
So, one of the things that I
Can
got.
I just ask Phil something?
Oh, sure.
As a member of the Board of Selectmen, were you expecting a different process to the town meeting?
Well, I understood it that at first, and this morphed a little bit, that it was gonna be you doing the review process. I didn't know if planning board would be involved with that or not. The option that it is a good one, okay? I think they have a role in this, in the typical development of ordinances. I think that you establish the committee, that's clear to most everybody. I've heard alternate energies that might be different than that, but, and I won't expand on that.
Well, I guess the question of Chairman of the Planning Board, Paul, is here. Are you seeing it any different than what we've just talked
No,
about?
this is fine. This is fine procedure.
Okay,
What you wanna do.
Thank you.
yeah. Well, that clarifies.
So I would like to.
I'm sorry, did I answer your? what was your
No,
question?
not really.
What was your question?
Well, I think that was your opinion.
Yep.
I was looking for your interpretation of the select board's route to,
Interpretation of the process,
yeah,
I think they're sitting there watching it unfold.
okay.
I don't know that there's been any specific discussion on, other than once it got formed. And we accepted the language of the moratorium and those various steps, as well as the original petition. So, other than those things and conversations we've had at town meetings and the like, it seems to me this is proceeding down the path. I had heard an alternate path, voiced, and I'm not gonna get into that, so I had a question what you guys understood. You guys understand it the way I do, and I don't know that there's any other alternate understanding for the select board, okay? I'm not aware of any. But,
Cause I would hate to see the work of these fine ladies and gentlemen
that's a concern I have, that the town is
be
relying
snubbed out.
very heavily on you guys. I haven't heard one descending or piece of dissent in terms of language that would say otherwise, that you're doing a great job and everybody appreciates it. So,
Until town meeting.
that's right. Well, what I look at my role in this is just outside. I don't have a role on your board. Happy to be here. Ordinance language and ordinance stuff is a hot spot for me, so I'm here. I'm not sure any other select board person has to be here, other than one's supposed to be here, but that's beside the point.
Right, there is one on our committee.
Yeah. So, that said, I watch it, I'll give input where I think it's helpful. If it's not, that's fine too. So, thank you.
Okay.
I
So-
have a question for Phil.
Okay.
if I could.
Sure.
Is the, one of the things that came out of, this ordinance, the first version of it, of course, is licensing.
Yep.
And a fee and those kinds of things. Have we established a fee as a town?
Well, I'm not aware that there's been a conversation for the select board to establish a fee. I think they're waiting to see if there's something to establish first. I mean, we have one that's in place and it says we're gonna do a fee, so theoretically, when we review, this is standard procedure, I must say, for all fees and fines and that sort of thing within our town. There typically is a review at some point, kind of as needed. I don't know that there's a specific annual trigger, maybe there should be. And the select board reviews those and determines what the fees will be. Often we'll ask Brandon for input,
Yeah.
you know, just like you folks do and just like the planning board does.
Well, I think that is a board issue because I don't know what it's gonna cost to administer.
I think it would be
Any
very
other
helpful in
ordinance.
the final phase of this for us to have had that conversation and come up with a fee. Now, my idea of what a fee should cost is no more than it absolutely has to cover the administrative costs, but that's my take, okay? Which would not be much. Somebody showing up, there's already a form, and they gotta have Brandon go through the motions to do a permit. Brandon, do you see that any different?
No.
So.
Thank you, Phil. So in talking to the town's attorney last week at great length, we have to, and I'm not sure I can say the right words. This gravel and sand ordinance is not a zoning ordinance. It's a gravel and sand mineral extraction ordinance that you can't allow certain people to do one thing and somebody else something different. If it's truly a life and safety, health and safety and welfare protection ordinance, then you can't say, well, you can blast 500 feet from the house, but you gotta be 2,000. You can take 15,000 yards, but he can take 30. It has to be what it's supposed to be. Your zoning ordinance that we have has 3 zones: village, rural residential, and rural. Those zones already have in them certain activities that can be done in a zone. It has setbacks from one house to the next, from the road. It has minimum lot sizes depending on the zone. It has shoreline zoning, all kinds of things. That's where, if we don't want a quarry in the village, no matter if it's East Sebago Village or Sebago Center Village, or anywhere else, North Sebago Village, that we can put in the zoning ordinances, which we're charged to review, and there's a moratorium still in place until that's done. That's where we're going to put additional restrictions based on the zone they're in, but not in this extraction ordinance. This is simply saying that if you're allowed to extract in this spot, then this is where what you can do, and not limit it to the zoning. It's not a zoning ordinance. And it took a while for me to get that. So when you go through these changes, think of that. And we have some activities already in town. And according to the attorney, when you start grandfathering your business, but not yours, and allowing him to do it, but not you, it doesn't stand distinct test when you go to court, and most likely you will lose. And the last thing we want to do is set anything up that anybody that's currently doing business in town or trying to come into town can be, win in court and make this whole ordinance worthless. So that's kind of the point. So we did add to this, right to the very top, gravel and mineral extraction ordinance. So that was added in there. The change to 101, we added loam, clay, under or within the earth, and visitors, and delivering or removing gravel. And then burdening traffic. Say that 3 times. Along with some adverse dust in nearby properties. He also added under 102, health, safety, and welfare, protection of the citizens and visitors to the town. Another big one was on 104. And I think this is kind of key because it's, for the purpose of this ordinance, extraction shall mean quarrying, mining, digging, drilling, blasting for, or removing by any other means from below the surface of the earth. So, I won't jump ahead right now, but with a 15,000 yard per year limit, this means that you can only mine, dig, drill, blast for, or remove that 15,000 yards. So that means you can't come in and say, well, instead of blasting for 15,000 yards this year and then 15,000 yards next year and so on, I'll just come in and blast 150,000 yards out, and then I'll just, I'll have 15,000 yards every year. Because blasting it, you're removing it. You're moving it, extracting it. So that limits you to the amount of blasting that you can do based on the amount of material you can extract. So that, to me, that kind of limits and handles that issue about, well, they come in and blast 25 times a year, or 20 times a year, or one big one. And he did add under B, the clay, loam, rock, aggregate materials, sand, soil, found in or within the earth. The next big,
We don't have a definition of blasting. Do we need one there? Or do you wanna do all these questions after you go through?
We do it page by page, simple.
we can, anywhere you guys wanna do it.
Well, I said one comment on this section 201. I think you're getting around with, when you say, stockpile exemption 3-year window. Talking about an exemption, and then once approved, the requesting party must wait 3 years, and that's referring to private use. And then you say, except the town may secure an exemption any year in which it needs material for its own roads. And I would add that, since we're probably thinking about the pit, that they're saving for 114, and state roads in town. So in other words, that will allow them to use the gravel they've been saving at shop to fix the roads, state roads in town. Be to our advantage, not necessarily a private use.
Well, I had a conversation with Paul Anderson about the stockpiling. And that's what kind of changed this section a little bit, because under normal circumstances, he doesn't stockpile a lot of material. However, if he was gonna bid on repairing and upgrading and rebuilding Anderson Road for a mile, then 15,000 yards wouldn't be enough to do that, and he would lose that business, he'd lose that job and not be able to bid on it. So the conversation that I had with the attorney was, we need to put something in there to allow a company, whether it's KM Tuttle or Shaw Brothers or whoever, Anderson and Sons, or any other contractors, to be able to feel confident they could actually bid on a job and get it, and then actually do what they need to do to be able to do that job. But I think the spirit of this committee was that we didn't want to have a facility that was only a stockpiling facility and bring in 500,000 yards a year, year after year after year after year, and have all that massive truck traffic.
I'm not thinking of that, I'm thinking about the removal of material from an existing pit for a project, either that's a town road or, so I was thinking more of the removal, and that's when, they said that Shaw was holding some of that gravel back for the repair of 114. I hope this is designed to sort of allow them, when it's a public project, to tap in as much as they need.
I think.
Rather than bringing it into there, which is not, and then using it, just taking what's there for a big project, allowing that. as-
Well, if it's already stockpiled, then they're not
Well,
removing
you're
it
not,
from here.
it's not stockpiled, it's sitting there undug up. It hasn't been brought in, it's just material they've left awaiting that project. It would be to the town's advantage if they could do that, and we wouldn't, I think you're getting at what you want, but it's not necessarily to say not bringing it in and stockpiling it for years, but just leaving it in the ground, and then when a big project comes up, having it available for that,
For that big project.
for the,
When you're doing
repair
extraction.
114.
Then you're extracting, the way this is written, they would have a limit of 15,000 yards.
I think the exemption language down here, when he says, except the town may secure an exemption any year in which it needs material for its own roads. And I would think that and for state roads as well. In other words, we could give ourselves an exemption to allow, or some ability to allow it to come from pits in town for uses in town when we need it, you know what I mean? That's all I was thinking, that was the one thought that came up. You know, because they mentioned that might need to be available, a good sized portion of, and that road needed to be repaired.
Which paragraph are you referring to?
Section 201, the last paragraph, stockpile exemption, 3-year window, and at the last sentence. That's what I was thinking about. You know what I mean, is securing the ability for the town to get whatever the amount it needs, if there's gonna be a big project, it's a public project, not necessarily a private.
So should we add after the word town, state?
Yeah, and state roads in town.
Where,
That's an exemption for everybody in town if you do that.
It is for everybody?
Yeah, I
Why would
think
it
that's
be, why would it be just for one?
No, it'll be for the purposes of road building, not to every person for any purpose, that's the 3-year thing.
Well, the municipality I get, and that's a separate entity, and that's always, almost always done.
Whatever, just a thought.
But no, but my thought is if you exempt Shaw Brothers, for example, on their road project, everybody's exempted.
Yeah.
And you've undone the whole idea.
Well, in town.
Yeah.
Whatever.
These are hard choices.
Yeah, we have,
It's to the town's advantage if the thing is used for that.
Totally get that.
Right, whatever.
well, let's think about that.
Sole comment, the rest of it I think is pretty good.
So this is saying that once a year, once every 3 years, somebody who has these resources, sand pit, gravel pit, whatever, can apply for a permit for an additional, what?
25,000 yards to be brought onto a lot or parcel for stockpiling.
but not extraction.
It does not address this extraction at all.
And it's only allowing you bringing more material once every 3 years.
And then removing those materials, so they have a total of 40,000 that year?
It would be 55, actually. Because
If they
total
already-
limit,
Yeah, you're right, if they had 15 and 15 and then, okay, I get that.
so that's a substantial amount of gravel.
Yeah, that's a lot of latitude already.
Right.
So 30 feet wide times 1 times, right, 30 feet across, 1 foot deep times how long is the road? 1,000 feet? 1,500 feet?
In town,
Yeah, 1,000 feet,
gotta be 1,500, I would think.
1,500.
Distance, yeah.
1,000 feet is from the post office to Chutes Dam.
Ah,
It's not very long.
Okay, well, we'll just, you dog, times 30. 1,500 feet times 30 equals 45,000 divided by 27. I got 1,500 yards, did I figure that right? 30 feet across, it wouldn't even be that, would it? 30 feet times 1
I
foot.
think it's 30 feet, I think it's 15 and 15,
Okay,
yeah.
so 30 feet times 1 foot equals times 1,500 divided by 27. 1,700 yards.
Yeah, so 50,000 is enough to do 114 from Sebago to Naples,
Is it?
or maybe. But, okay.
No, let me just. 5 times.
I think the attorney did have a good point, though, that to some extent, we could meet every week for the next year and come up with something different every week that we should add or take away. And at some point,
Yeah.
you gotta say, we got something that's really good, and if something needs to be added to a year from now, then, I mean, if we get a whole bunch of contractors coming in saying this, they're out of business because they can't, that's not enough, then maybe we need to, we'll just pass another exemption or something for whatever it is, but,
So before we go on,
I was gonna say, that seems pretty liberal to me, we have more than enough there.
yeah, I think so,
Yeah,
yeah.
I do too.
Would you mind going back to page 1?
I don't mind.
Does anybody have any stuff they wanna say on page 1? Cause I gotta.
I think I'm okay on that, when you put it up, the language for, the safety and welfare, move down, I think I'm okay with that being there.
Okay, well, so I just had where it says, adverse dust, odors, vibration, do we want noise in there?
Sure.
I think if we have all these things listed out and we omit noise,
Yeah, this is,
You gotta have
I think.
Well, it does say if you read above that, there is including the potential for excessive noise from trucks in processing.
Oh, what about,
yeah,
does it say processing period?
Right. It's excessive
Trucks
noise
and
from
processing.
trucks and processing.
okay, yeah,
From trucks.
you're right, Barry, good.
Okay.
As long as it says processing, because there's other machinery.
That's right, so it's got it all, it's got noise and trucks and processing.
So, where it gives, section 102, where it says, the main constitution for all the health, safety, welfare, and protection of its citizens and visitors to the town. Does that actually give that authority in section 30A? I know that's what we want it to do. So
I have not read 30A, so I can't answer that question.
it's in the home rule section, but, the purpose of this, I would think that our purpose would also be the health, safety, welfare, and protection of its citizens and towns, and the citizens of Sebago. In other words, why have that in the authority? Just seems like extra words.
Well, there must be a legal reason to put it in there to protect us even more because of that statute. Perhaps that statute gives us the authority to do that.
I don't know, but I'm asking the question, so.
I'll get the answer to it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Good job, Barry. Well, no, it just,
No,
to me, it doesn't, like, it can be a little, go,
I'll
Well,
ask
you
him why
wrote-
that
what was
authority
your
granted by
Isaac
Title 30A, Section 3001. I'll ask him for a letter of opinion to why that needs to be in there, and then send that to everybody.
or if it should be in
Purpose of authority.
in the purpose of that authority.
Where's the
Okay.
most effective, that's the question.
Right.
Okay,
That's
Yeah,
all.
there must be some reason for it.
all right, so let's,
And then on
Was that it?
page 1, did
Is
we
that-
want a definition of blasting?
Isn't that, described under the state statute and through the DEP permit?
I don't know, but we specifically address blasting in this. When we address gravel and extraction, we have definitions for them. I don't know if there are different types of blasting. Is there hydrofracking? Could they possibly do hydrofracking there rather than blasting? I'm sure they could. Which,
If this is a subset of your standard ordinances and included in the overall ordinance, then that set of definitions is important because it's relevant to all units. There's two things to do. Number one, make sure it's in that set.
this set we're working on,
No, the set that's
the
in
big set.
the whole ordinance.
Yeah.
Because there is a section.
I'll ask them if we
Maybe
have
you
to
can answer
define
that.
that.
Okay. Or if it isn't already defined.
And the other thing to check is to make sure what you guys decide this means. If there's some definition here that's specific to this, make sure it matches what's in the other.
Right.
There'll be a proposed change to the
That's-
land use
Right.
ordinance.
Right. Which you could do at the same time you do this, obviously.
Okay,
I'm assuming the attorney is double checking this stuff for us.
I don't know, I learned a long time ago
Yeah,
not
I
to
know.
assume stuff like that.
Okay, on page 2, on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, 25,000 cubic years, it should be yards.
right.
I like cubic years.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
So, okay, Barry, you haven't done page 3 yet, so,
Okay.
but I do have a question.
So continuing from page 2, bottom, it says, if a licensee intends to conduct any blasting during its licensed year, it shall also designate on the license form, and the grant of the license shall be subject to upon the condition that the licensee accept and shall be responsible for any damages caused by the blasting, regardless of if it's conducted by a subcontractor party. And property owners in Sebago may look at the licensee for damages compensation from both the licensee's own insurance and/or from the bond detailed below. Okay, and so below, and we'll get to that, but we're asking before every blast to provide a bond. The license, the company. As a condition of the renewal of any license, the town may consider whether the licensee unreasonably refused to compensate or make whole any damaged party, and if so, may deny the renewal of a license. That was something that we thought was very important. If there's damage done to somebody and they refuse to settle with that guy, then they're not gonna get a license next year till they take care of that.
Do we need to specify notifications for inspections in that?
Well,
It's
that's
further.
covered under inspections.
It
It is further in.
Where?
Um,
Routine inspection, okay.
Routine inspections, all parties and license holders must allow and permit reasonable and periodic inspection of the premises, equipment, and operations by the town code enforcement officer or their designee. Such inspection shall allow the town to photo document anything it deems necessary or relevant to make measurements if necessary, and the licensee shall allow the town to review any person found on site. Interview. The town may also take reasonable samples of water or other materials at any location on the lot or parcel for testing purposes, provided it pays for the cost of testing and provided it shares any results with the licensee.
Okay, but I like that, but it doesn't deal with the homeowners.
Right. I believe that's, under your blasting and noise mitigations. We'll see where it goes,
Okay.
okay?
It is.
Hours of operation, we discussed some different times for trucking operations versus blasting and extraction. Those have been added.
Should we, have, federal different ones, but
Well, there's a lot of state holidays like veterans, no, that's a federal holiday, right?
yeah, so.
But there are some state holidays that,
Veterans Day, and that's one.
yeah, and then some holidays that companies work so that they can give, for example, the day after Thanksgiving off. So they work a state holiday and then they have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off at Thanksgiving, and the same at Christmas if it falls that way. I don't know.
I'm good with national holidays. If you want them. I'm good with them.
Yeah. Not a big deal, I don't think there's many affected.
I think there's only a couple.
Flag Day.
I think it's so insignificant that
Yeah.
that's not an issue. We did keep in there, the trucks entering and leaving be covered for the dust mitigation.
Yep.
Blasting and noise. We're on page 4, Brennan. Blasting and noise vibration mitigation, no person or party shall engage in explosive blasting as part of any extraction activities within 500 feet of a residence. No licensee shall conduct a blast except upon 30 days advance notice to the town and those parties within 2,000 feet of the proposed blast site.
So, looking up a couple of things, by the way, in terms of the minimum blast radius for, inspections, it is a half mile through the DEP, so this is actually more lenient than that.
So we should change that 2,000 feet to half a mile,
Yes,
okay?
absolutely. The other one is, the notion of non-conforming or grandfathering is, we checked with our attorney, it is very, done all the time.
On that last one, a half a mile is approximately 2,500, 2,600 feet, so you might just wanna write 2,500 feet or something.
Well, you gotta go with the minimum you can really do anyway is DEP standard, right?
But I'm just suggesting that that's a close enough measurement to ask.
So what is it, 26?
I think it would be 26 or something.
5,280 feet.
Divided by
About two.
Well, hang on.
2,600.
2,640 feet, so 2,600 feet or 2,700.
Okay. Got it.
Round it down,
The town code enforcement officer or their designee can request to be present during any blasting, but they must comply with all the same safety requirements imposed upon the licensed and their personnel. Now, one of the things that Mr. Anderson told me is that they're 500 feet from a residence. However, they do small blasts and they do directional blasts. And having a 15,000 yard per limit per year is gonna limit anybody from huge 10-acre blasts all at once, because it's gonna extract more than 15,000 yards. Having the licensee responsible for any damage equally to the blasting company is also, I feel, gonna force them to do directional blasts and smaller blasts, because now they're responsible for the damage, not the blasting company. So I think putting the burden on, even right now, Paul Anderson, when he blasts, it's the blasting company. With this new ordinance, it's gonna be him and the blasting company. So I think they're gonna be, you're really limiting the size of the blast. They're obviously gonna be doing directional blasts because they don't wanna be responsible for any damage next door. And they're gonna do smaller blasts because of the 15,000 yards. So I don't think the 500 feet is really out of line. And just for the record, and we're not pointing this at Gorham Sand and Gravel, however, their blast site is 800 feet from the nearest residence as they proposed to the planning board. So they're already 300 feet further than the Andersons are with their quarry on the Peabody Pond Road. And there's been no damage, no complaints, no nothing from their quarry up there. So in order to get away from that whole grandfathering whether it's, will hold up in court, whether it won't, this attorney says it will, this one says it won't. It's ultimately up to a court to decide, and how can you say to that homeowner up there that, well, you can blast 500 feet to your house, but they gotta be 2,000 for my house? Or if you go with 2,000 and you put people out of business that have been in business for 20 years with no issues, no complaints, no damage, no nothing. So I think that's a fairer number and a more fair way to go after, you know, to address that, than to try to have two standards.
So in the zoning, we'll change the
In the zoning, you can say no blasting within the village district.
You can put it in
That
all.
would be the,
You can put that in the zoning. Just like we don't have junkyards and all that list in the aquifers could move over to every zone in town or whatever. And you could add blasting in the village, you could add 2,000 feet from a house in the village rural residential. You do whatever you want in your zoning, but not in an ordinance.
So is this committee, we have the authority to work on zoning then?
Our original mission was to deal with the zoning and the land use.
Yeah.
And then this was designed and given us to deal with as well.
I have a suggestion for this, in that as we do this ordinance, that we, at the same time, maybe it's a second decision at the town hall meeting, whatever it may be, that we do modify the table of uses. Just slightly, to take care of it.
question is the procedure, is that done at a town meeting as an amendment or an adjustment to the existing ordinance?
Yeah.
That would probably have to go in front of it.
So that,
Well, we're already tasked,
Let's bring one question on that, and it goes back to page 2. Again, the not forgetting the language of stockpiling. It says, except the town may secure an exemption any year. Does it mean for its own removal, that the town, or should they say, except the town may grant an exemption any year? So
the town may grant one.
Yeah, I think you might wanna call it, say, grant. And then it could, then grant and for roads in town, which could.
So you would,
include
you take out the
or
word
public roads in
exception and
town.
put grant, Paul, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I take out the word secure. Is it securing an exemption for itself as an entity that removes gravel? Or is it granting an exemption to a private party to get more gravel for its own needs?
Well, a licensed party would be the private.
The private party. What I wanna do is limit it to the town granting an exemption when it needs it. You know, and not necessarily an exemption. The exemption for the private parties is already covered in 25 cubic yards. I mean, they can stockpile at the private parties, private uses. But when they say except the town may secure, when you use the word secure, you think is the town securing for itself an exemption, or is it granting one to a private party? And just, that's a question that came up on that, that's all.
Well, I read that as two, I read that as two separate.
Secure, in other words, it's limited to the town granting itself an exemption from its own resources, or an exemption.
You know, the bigger question, the better question is, you know, the town doesn't always do their own work. So now are we granting the town an exemption to forward to a private contractor who may get a contract with the town to rebuild the town's road? So
you should.
I think so.
That's what I was getting at earlier,
Yeah.
that somehow that,
so it's
So
not,
to me, this is aimed just for the municipality to operate the way it needs to.
yeah, it can have the resources it wants when it needs it.
Right, that's very different than what you're saying, the town able to grant an exemption to anybody.
No, I wasn't getting it at anybody, to a
You
contractor.
gotta be careful with the language,
Well,
that's all.
you can't say that, you know, the town,
There's
people
no
are
rules.
eligible to get an exemption, and then the town can grant an exemption to anybody.
This is
no,
sort of
at
like
any
saying
time.
the town can exempt this at any time.
Well, for its own
That's not what
use,
you mean.
for roads, and it's limited to
Well,
roads.
it just needs to include that, though, it needs to
public roads.
include for public roads,
State.
either by the town or contracted by the town.
Yeah.
Just that,
So you're
You
just
could
saying
say,
that, so,
you could say the municipality or their agent, right?
or an agency.
or the designated,
Doesn't that language work in that?
Well, we've used it
It's
before.
limited to roads, not for any purpose, and not, use public roads, to limit it to public purposes.
so I think, Paul, I think to answer your question, Paul, this exemption should be A and B, because A is a licensed party may request from the town a one-time exemption to allow an additional 25,000 cubic yards of material to be brought onto a parcel land for stockpiling.
Yep.
Once approved, the requesting party must wait 3 years to secure a further,
Once every 3 years, they can stockpile
Exemption.
25,000.
an addition, so that would be A. B would be additionally exemption,
The town
the town may do it. So it kinda needs to be two separate A and B.
it'll be clearer.
It would be
It
clear.
would be.
They would.
Yeah.
So, that's doing the same exact thing, and then add or
Well,
designate.
once the A sort of is the private, for private purposes thing, and the B is for public purposes.
Correct. And then we can add or designated agent, because you're absolutely right. The town of Sebago did Anderson Road ourselves, but if we subbed it out
Right.
to somebody, then they may have to set up a shop and,
And we,
if it was one of our own town, if it was already a quarry pit, whatever, in Sebago, and they got the bid, then they'd be stockpiling it on their own land for that project.
Yeah.
If somebody didn't have a pit here, then they'd be stockpiling it in Baldwin or wherever, so, and then bringing it in from there.
I don't know if this makes any difference or not, maybe that's what you're saying, but, when Anderson, for example, finished up Hawks Road, the second half of Hawks Road, that whole annual cycle that the town was gonna do was done by Anderson, cause the crew quit. You could easily say, work secured on town roads through the town. Those numbers are outside of the 15,000. Whatever it takes to do that road.
Any contractor performing work for the town.
Right.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know
wrote
if that's
or
what-
designated
I don't know if
agent.
that's what you just said.
Yeah, I think it just generally is covered by the notion the town may grant an exemption any year it needs materials for its own roads or state roads in town. And then that covers all that,
Yeah.
simplifies it to a
But
one.
that's not an open, I don't know, maybe it essentially becomes an open thing to anybody that comes in and does work for the town.
It limits it to public roads, it limits it to
Yeah.
roads, I mean, it isn't just for any purpose.
But that
Let
will not,
alone cap me.
that will not cover, for example, Shaw Brothers doing 114 now, because that's a state road.
The town might grant an exemption to its rule, though, to allow that material to be used for the road.
Yeah, it depends on how this is worded,
But
right?
it allows it, it doesn't require it.
Right.
So the town doesn't necessarily have to grant it if it doesn't answer.
All right, so moving along a little bit,
So, back to 206. We haven't really said what we're gonna do with that. Do we have an intention to do something with sustainable uses in addition to this? My concern honestly is, we wanna protect our natural resources for sure. And we before had the resource protection zone as part of a boundary, along with the 2,600 feet. So my question is, how do we still protect the waters of Sebago, for instance, and our streams and aquifers and those kinds of things, from being, I'll say dug up as quarries and mining operations, particularly by the waterfront?
so are you back on 206?
I'm back on 206.
Okay.
Still there, yeah. I haven't left yet.
So,
Sorry.
do we? What are you proposing?
I'm saying in our comp plan, right, we're very clear about protecting our resources for
Mhm.
the future. Okay.
So wouldn't
And
that,
so
wouldn't
with that
that
in mind-
comprehensive plan cover the resource protection if somebody wanted to put a gravel pit in that resource protected area? Is that already covered? This is just an extraction ordinance,
I
not a
understand that.
zoning.
I understand that. But shouldn't we, every ordinance we do, shouldn't we consider that in terms of protecting our natural resources and the like?
I will make a note of that and ask the attorney.
Where did you wanna put that?
Um, I'm not sure it fits here directly, but maybe is in, back of the purpose. In terms of protecting natural resources.
I'll write it down and I wrote it down and wherever he thinks it would best fit in here, he can add it in.
Under purpose, it could say perhaps something referring to our comprehensive goals of the comprehensive plan.
Something like that would work. So it gets considered. So it's really about protection of natural resources.
Alright, so the next section was prior to any blasting, I'm still on 206, the last paragraph. Prior to any blasting, the licensee shall provide the town an indemnity bond of not less than $500,000 in coverage, covering any and all claims of damages to neighboring properties. This bond shall be written such that it may be called upon by any property owner in the town of Sebago damaged by blasting, including the town. Such bond shall be in addition to any insurance coverage licensee and its subcontracting blasting companies may hold.
Were we going to have the town be the point of contact for this insurance stuff? I'm not sure how bonds work. So, gee, I got a crack in my chimney now. Mr. Town Manager, what do I do? Is the town gonna facilitate that, or am I supposed to call that bond?
Brandon might have to
insurance
answer that because he's
company?
probably dealt with bonds on certain jobs before. Who does the claimant contact if there's a bond? The town or the guy who built the house or the guy that blasted it?
Well, first you gotta define liability, it's gotta be an investigation. So, there's gotta be a complaint, there has to be an investigation, there has to be a report, and then there has to be an assignment of some blame, and then you go after somebody's bond. But, it's a lengthy process, it's not like, oh, I got a crack, give me $500.
No, I get that, but Dave McCarthy can't do that because I can't investigate myself.
Right, well,
So
that should be addressed.
shouldn't that be outlined in some definition or background piece of information
Right,
that supports this? Would you be that party, Brendan? That's the question.
Well, it needs to be in the ordinance, it needs to be
Right.
spelled out what the procedure for.
Right,
remedy
but
is.
How about if we
But
set up
if
a
we design,
committee?
if we design the ordinance, like David is saying, so that the average person isn't their own judge or jury on this.
Right.
To me, in our structure in this town, you're the policeman. So aren't you the logical one to assess that and the ordinance, to me, if that's the case, needs to give you that authority to make that call, and your call is final.
Oh, I could do the original assessment.
Otherwise, every one of these goes to court.
Well, exactly, so I would make the original assessment, and refer it to whoever holds the bond, refer it to the insurance company.
Well, right, but
The
some,
bond,
Do their own investigation.
well, that's the problem.
Exactly.
That's the hidden joke in this whole, it's not a joke.
But that's
the hidden problem in this whole thing is that a bond company is going to do some sort of an assessment. I don't know what that involves, neither does a homeowner. So I'm asking like a stupid homeowner. Not that homeowners are stupid, but they're uneducated in this field, okay, as I am. So when that's the case, I've got a cracked foundation now from the blast.
so, if you had a cracked foundation,
Yeah.
say, or you got up, your foundation was cracked, first thing you do is you would call your insurance company.
Yeah,
And they would send somebody out to investigate, to look at it.
why would it have to go that way? Why wouldn't it normally go to the person who's doing the blasting and have them have to do, why? I'm afraid if my insurance pays that and chooses not to fight the battle for some reason, that my rates then go up. That's not right.
Well,
That's what we're trying to
And
protect.
then you could be,
well, then we need, yeah, I agree with you, I agree with you.
So, I mean, this
But
is the
that's-
place to
that's
hash
the
it
way
out.
is. You have damage to your property, you call your insurance agent files a claim against the bond, or, the responsible person's insurance. This happens all the time, and you argue with your insurance company recommends you just settle, because they come to some agreement between the two insurance company for a
Yeah.
settlement. And, and you say, I don't wanna settle for this,
That's kinda like if you got in a car accident, I call my insurance.
Why should the
company.
homeowner be placed in that situation?
I don't know how else to do it.
I don't either, and that's the question, is there an alternate route? And is there a better route we can discover
Not
and
that I
apply
know
here? Cause we wanna do better than that.
I think, Barry, that's a question for the attorney.
Yeah, I wrote down that, just
Because-
fill out the procedure.
I think you're gonna get a lot of standard procedure language.
Yeah, yeah, but as far as us, maybe we can say we want a 3-person
Yep.
panel, selectman, code enforcement officer, town manager. None of them are all too busy. They can all go down and do an inspection on, after, somebody makes a claim and contacts the town.
I'd be at peace with that.
I don't know how to
If,
proceed from
if
there.
that holds the legal test, I would
Yes.
be at peace with something like that, cause then it's people in our own town making the call for our own people. I like that if we can get there.
I'll ask the attorney what's the best way to proceed with that.
What do you
I'm sure
think,
he's
Paul?
done
I don't know enough about bonds and how you make bond claims, but
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a simple question, how do you make a bond claim? And then we need to spell out that procedure.
and if that committee decides that yes, the gravel pit owner is responsible, then it should be the town that, I don't know.
Well, in
it's
insurance, when you're a contractor and it's insurance, David, you're probably familiar with this like I am.
Yeah.
If I'm the general and I hire a sub, I would never take a copy of an insurance certificate and say, okay, I've got that, that's good. Because any idiot can make a copy of that document and no longer has a policy to back it up, and you wouldn't know that until you went to put in a claim. So the way you eliminate that is you go, you ask the sub, who is your insurance carrier? I go to, as a general, go to that insurance carrier, and he issues a certificate with my name on it.
Yeah, well, that's what we talked about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But why don't we just make that blasting company responsible? We can have them,
You
but
still have the same problem.
then we can take
There's
away
two
their
parties
permit.
that are culpable now. And maybe,
Let's say, if upon fact finding by our blasting crack committee, we find that you're liable, period, that's it.
if you get the bond company to assign that, delegate
Forget the
that
bond.
authority to that
Forget the
group,
bond.
perfect. To me,
Forget the
that
bond.
does that. To me, that
Forget the
does.
bond, make the company liable, forget the bond.
Well, this ordinance does say that.
I think if you don't have a bond set aside, you're gonna be in court with that.
It is in here making them equally responsible as a blasting company, but then this is the bond to back it up.
That's why you do a bond.
No, I get that, but I'm also thinking that we're not talking $40,000 claims here. We're talking, cause really what's gonna happen is we're gonna patch your foundation, we're gonna make it whole. We're not gonna rip it out and give you a whole new foundation or a whole new sidewall or something like that. And the same thing with the chimney, so I'm thinking every claim's gonna be under $20,000-$30,000 at this point.
All right, I'll get that.
Just trying to make it as simple as possible.
Volume logs, there was really no change to that.
Well, Perry, they omitted something.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Well, he put in no less than on a semi-annual basis.
No, we wanted weekly.
I know we did.
That's what I have written out there.
And I think his feeling was that was like
We don't care.
over,
Hurt his feelings.
we want it weekly.
Yeah, we do.
And we really said they just, passed
I'm gonna
the
tell you
laws
what,
weekly.
and I've collected those slips from trucks before on state jobs. A truck driver will not have the slips from yesterday. Some are very well organized, they got it, everything right there on a clip for you. Other ones, I don't know what happened yesterday, the dog ate them.
Well, once they get going, they got a week to get them, or they lose their permit,
Fill out the window.
they'll have them. All right, let's move right along.
Okay, wait a minute.
Page five.
Exempted activities, that, there was no changes to that. We did add the stop work order. If in the opinion of the code enforcement officer, a licensee is in violation of this ordinance, the code enforcement officer or designate may issue a stop work order which suspends all activity until such time as the licensee agrees to abate or remedy the violation. We did add that.
We did have the code enforcement officer or his designee or appointee, right? This still just limits us to the code enforcement officer.
No,
No, it says-
officer or designee may issue a stop work order. So
In the
Brandon's
opinion
out of
the
town and
code
I'm covering
enforcement
for him?
officer-
Then I can issue that
Okay,
stop.
okay, sorry,
Okay.
you're right.
Penalties. The change in that was that there was a provision added for a $2,500 per day for any other type of violation. So if we're telling them they're not covering their load, and they don't cover the load, and they say, well, I'm just not gonna cover it, and then they go a week, then they got a penalty. They can get a stop work order above, cause they're in violation, and they got a penalty. Should the town prevail in any action to enforce the terms and conditions of the ordinance, it shall be entitled to reasonable attorney's fees incurred as well as in addition to any fines awarded by the court.
Okay, terms is spelled wrong.
Gotcha.
And I think turns, we get birds.
I can tell you that he put this together very quickly for us to have for tonight, so.
No, that's all right. Well, you got a bunch of corrections to do anyway, we'll scratch out some of it.
Other than that, there was really no other change to it.
Why just, wouldn't we say expenses or costs? What's reasonable attorney fees? I mean,
Driven by the court. The court has to approve attorney's fees,
okay,
it should come to that.
but let's say we've got town personnel in court for 3 days.
Yeah.
Or 3 half days or something, you know, driving in. Wouldn't we be able to recover those
Yes,
costs?
you can put in an order
Attorney's
for
fees?
attorney's fees, and then the judge issues an amount, an order for an amount, that's fairly common in the court. It requires the party that loses the motions, is found at fault, also have to pay it.
But again, does he have to pay for the code enforcement office to get down there for?
It'd be up to, you could all put it in to a request to the court for all the costs of the proceedings.
Are you saying this is out of our hands anyway?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the same way that you don't determine liability because the bond company is gonna retain to itself its own determination. Same idea.
I think in that bond conversation, at least getting some guidelines for a homeowner, at least knowing the process. Because I was gonna make the comment earlier, when it comes to insurance, we can say all that we want here, but insurance companies are not in business to give people money.
despite the fact that it's called insurance. So I deal with it on a weekly basis across the entire, half the state here, so,
Well, that bond isn't gonna just cover your blasting either, it's gonna cover like your foundations and stuff. If you have well water damage or a chunk of it comes through you far enough away and goes through your roof or something like that.
Right.
But somebody's
So-
gonna have to look at the language on that.
right.
So let me ask you this, I thought $500,000 was a lot. I don't know what a bond costs, whether it costs $100 per million or 10,000 per million, I don't know. But if you have a bond and there is a charge against this bond, like we're talking about with a foundation, let's say there's a $30,000. Now, is the company obligated, meaning the gravel pit operator, are they obligated to maintain $500,000 after that point also?
Every time they blast, they gotta get a new bond.
No, but
According
let's
to
say
this-
they have, I would think that a company would have a bond for all. They'll buy a
People are gonna have
bond
insurance for their
Yeah.
operations and then a bond for a specific.
for specific events, but wouldn't a blasting, wouldn't that cover what they do at each individual event? I would think that would be cost prohibitive. Why wouldn't they say, we'll just have a bond for blasting, we estimate we're blasting 30 times a year?
If that's how they buy the bond, then if they buy a 1-year bond for all their blasting, then yeah, they're providing a bond, a current up-to-date bond every time they blast. But if they buy it for this specific blast, it's probably cheaper. And then when they decide to blast again, they'll buy another one for that blast.
I can't.
So it just depends on how
imagine
the company sets up a bond.
I usually in state contracts again, the bond is posted for the job. And if there's blasting, that's in that bond somewhere. Other things are probably in that bond for liability and so forth.
But does that same bond cover you 6 months from now when you go and blast
It's for
again?
the duration of the job, the contract duration, plus any.
So all
time
this
you
is really
decide
saying
to-
is that they have to maintain that bond, provided
So-
every time that they've got a bond.
Yeah, I don't think you want any language that says a bond every blast.
No, I'm asking if,
Bond must be in effect for every blast. You may wanna
Yes.
say that.
yes, but let's say they have a $100,000 payout.
Yep.
Now do they only have a $400,000 bond left?
That's a bond person question, and that's a good question to ask, because
So-
you want it maintained at 500, even if there's a payout.
Right.
And I don't, quite frankly, I've never exercised one, so I'm not sure.
What does the language say?
I do know that contractors will come back to me and the engineer and everybody on a state job and request to diminish a bond as the job progresses, because the risk is smaller, okay? And as the job gets more and more done. I don't see that, that type of thing affected.
I'll ask the question, Dave.
How about prior to any, this is the first line of that bond paragraph. The licensee shall provide and maintain to the town an indemnity bond.
Well, you could require an updated coverage statement from the bond company every
Well,
time.
doesn't that say what your question was,
I guess
Dave?
that might make sense.
If they buy a $500,000 bond, and then they use 100,000 of it, and to what you were saying, they got 400,000 left. But this says they must maintain a $500,000 bond prior to each blasting, so they would have to go get another $100,000 bond to bring them up to 500,000 again.
Every time they blast, the same degree of risk happens out there somewhere.
Right.
So it should be maintained at 500, and
Okay.
I've never had to do that on a state job, but.
I guess it does say, you're right, it does say prior to, so
Yeah.
how they accomplish that is
And-
not our business.
If that's
And to
what
answer
they-
your question, 500,000 is a lot. However, if, using the Andersons, if they blast 500 feet from a house up there and it's one house, 500 is a lot. But if we have something in the village that's 800 feet from several houses and they blast, it could be, and if something goes really bad, it could be several
Okay.
houses throwing a claim.
Okay,
So
okay,
500 is
I'm fine
not a
with
lot of
that.
money when there's 10 houses.
I'm fine with that, I'm going by what he said during an appeals meeting, that they have a $500,000 bond for closure of that and that's the largest he's ever heard of.
Right, I heard that too, so.
Yeah. But this is not apples and oranges that we're comparing, I get, so.
So I think we've covered everything pretty well on the, I'm just kind of chuckling because now I'll go back to the attorney with a few more, but we're really not changing anything. We're getting a few clarified on definitions. And that's way different than what we have been doing before, like we've been totally adding a whole new section or something, and this is clarifying things a little bit better, which I think makes it a better ordinance.
Yeah.
So, anybody got anything else to add on that?
Not on that. So, do we think this is it?
Well, I can get into work on these, and if you're happy with it, then I can get these changed for next Tuesday, present it to the selectmen for their review, and
I
I'll
wanna
post
see
it.
it before it goes to the selectmen. You wanna meet Monday night?
Monday is a holiday, I believe.
Easter.
Friday is a holiday.
I think Monday is too, I think you're right, I think it's something, cause taxes
It's
are Tuesday.
Is Monday?
There's something.
Are you here Tuesday, Bob? No, you're not here Tuesday, you're not here Tuesday. Are you here Tuesday?
No vacations
No.
allowed.
We go together on vacation.
Well, you gotta stop that.
Some people don't.
I would personally, probably during the time frame that you guys are gonna be around, I would not be here with this. I have a interview that I gotta do after work for
What day are
5:30.
you coming back?
The day before our appeal meeting, which is
May 3rd.
May 3rd, yeah.
May 3rd.
Desiree sent me something for the, So-
What I can do is get these
Be back on
revisions,
May 3rd.
you have ability to get email while you're gone,
Yes.
and as you, do you?
Yeah.
Let me get the revisions to these, I'll get a copy to Paul, Chris Parker, and Brandon.
when is town meeting?
June 10th or something like that, June something.
It's the first
I thought
Saturday
it
in
was
March.
actually May for some reason.
I thought the
it was-
town
I thought it was
vote was
May
in May, but
25th.
the meeting was
What's
in
that?
I
June.
thought it was May 25th.
That
Yeah.
sounds
No?
more like it to me.
They've been doing it on Tuesday evenings, haven't they?
We have been, yeah, so
The
it
25th is Memorial Day Monday.
Okay, so the 26th.
wouldn't be that then. I wanted to say 31st, but I don't know that that makes any sense.
Let me go, I'll find out.
We can find out.
That's the best.
That's easy.
I'm back Tuesday in the office.
Oh, so all my,
The town oracle, Desiree.
Usually it's 2 to 3 weeks before new fiscal year.
Yeah, the vote is the 14th of June,
What vote?
the state vote and our
Oh.
offices. Our
That's not when
candidate.
we're voting, is it?
I think it is. Usually they try to do it the same, so it's not two whole separate. That should be verified too.
Well, all I'm trying to do is,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, 2 weeks prior to town meeting, we have to have,
Alright. Town meeting's May 31st, the warrant's being signed May 3rd, so we really need to get this to the select board next Tuesday night in order to be on the warrant.
Well, then that means the select board has to have a public hearing.
Fine.
They can have the public hearing
That
after
may
the
not
warrant,
be gonna happen.
The time of day, you know?
the town meeting?
Yeah.
I thought it was like 6 PM, something like that.
So 5:31 at 6 P.M. All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's a select board meeting.
So, we've yet to have input from
so,
all the members of the planning board, we still have some changes to do. It's almost like we can't
I don't,
possibly get this done for the May 31st town
I
meeting.
don't see that happening
well, wait a minute.
actually.
So May
That was
31st,
the thing.
2 weeks prior to that, it has to be approved by the selectmen,
The final
the final,
draft.
which would be Tuesday the 17th. Do you meet on,
First Tuesday of the month,
and the third Tuesday?
if needed, yeah.
So the 17th you will be meeting.
That's next Tuesday, week from
No,
today.
this is May.
That's
Okay.
They said-
But
they said-
all I'm saying is if we need a public hearing here at a select board meeting, that consumes a whole meeting event in however meetings we have here.
I know that.
And then final decisions have to be made and a legal review if there's any amendments and.
I think we've got to probably, in the best interest of this whole thing, not to rush it and get it done. We ought to plan on a special town meeting sometime the end of June and get it done then. That's not a big thing to do.
I agree with that, but I don't know about doing it at the end
Why?
of June, because a lot of people aren't gonna be around.
When does that moratorium end?
Which one?
Started in January, whatever date that was, and 6 months
January
after
25th.
that, 180 days, so.
July sometime?
January 25th, was it?
We
I
don't,
believe it was the 25th.
that moratorium is gonna have to be extended at least another 180 days to give us a chance to review the whole land use
Yeah,
ordinance.
this isn't even that review.
Right. We've got off that review to take care of this.
Right, which is appropriate, because that's what we promised the
So-
people at the last town meeting.
It's gonna be another couple of months before we even finish that, because there's a lot of areas in that that are gonna be,
So the extensions are given.
right.
So you could have a selectmen's meeting and a public hearing, May 3rd. 2 weeks after that is the 17th. If there, and a public hearing, I guess.
May 3rd.
Yes, and then accept it the 17th.
I would think that's possible, but I don't think it's possible to have that on a warrant after that amount of time.
Why do you say that?
I would just say, talk with the powers to be in the office.
I'm not worried about it being in the booklet.
What's
It
that?
doesn't have to be in that booklet. It
Yeah,
can be on
it
a,
has to be advertised.
right. So,
I
that's what I'm saying, we have the 2
wouldn't dare
weeks.
put those numbers out there. I would double check first.
You like to ask Michelle to come in?
Yep,
Yeah,
you got 5 minutes. Before Paul throws me out. I guess it's all public meetings. I could.
you understand, it doesn't have to be in that booklet. We're not under a printing deadline.
I'm not saying that, I'm just saying she has dates that she has to put stuff out to have it printed, there's a whole piece of that takes time.
So again, it doesn't have to be in that booklet.
What we're trying to do.
You're the
is
expert.
If we can get this done by this town meeting, or if we're gonna have to go in sometime in June with a special town meeting, that's all.
Okay, so, Board of Selectmen is reading the second draft of the warrant at their next meeting. Still a little wiggle room in there to put in warrant articles as need be. Town meeting is scheduled for May 31st. If you're going, and the warrant has to be posted 10 days before town meeting.
All right.
If you're gonna have a public hearing, which I strongly recommend that you do,
Yes.
the public hearing has to be posted 10 days. So, you have time.
Well, here's my thinking, so the 31st, there's a selectmen's meeting on the 17th,
Correct,
if we needed a second public hearing,
correct,
right?
yes,
And we could put notification, and there's also a selectmen's meeting on the 3rd, which we
Yes.
could have a public hearing on this.
correct,
And if we put a notice of a second public hearing out on the 4th, the next day, that would give us 10 days,
correct,
right?
correct.
So we could do that. And then, I understand it wouldn't be printed in our annual town report, but you can have a warrant as an addendum, as a separate piece of paper.
Well, the warrant that's printed in the town report is not the official
Right.
warrant.
Okay.
The warrant that gets posted in town
Right.
at all the various locations, that's your official warrant. But the board is signing that at their, was it May 3rd meeting?
Could you add anything to it from that point?
Not after it's signed.
No, I could sign.
So that means you gotta have your public hearing before that.
No, you could put it on the warrant and have your public hearings afterwards. You don't have to have the public hearing prior to the warrant being signed.
Oh,
we certain
And then we
the
could-
process?
No. All the warrant is only gonna have the article that states, shall the town adopt an ordinance entitled Amendments to the Town of Sebago's Gravel and Mineral Extraction Ordinance.
Right.
And then you post a copy of the proposed ordinance with the warrant.
So to me, a public hearing is for any last minute changes that come out of the public.
Correct.
So we still have time to make those changes?
Yes,
What's the process from there?
you would, because you're gonna post this with your warrant.
Yeah.
Have your public hearings.
Yeah.
And then, at town meeting, you vote on the official document, which will have copies at town meeting.
Can anybody amend that
Okay.
document?
If you're happy, I'm happy.
They say that because we have an open floor town meeting, it can be amended on the floor.
Ah, there's an option.
Can a selectman say, let's say we decide that there's some legal issues that come up, can we get rid of, can we quash that?
You would vote to table the ordinance at town meeting.
Revise it and then come back to a special town meeting later.
My recommendation, if you feel that there's still a lot of tweaking left to do on this, a special town meeting would be in order. I would rather see this thing be done carefully and methodically
Right.
than to rush into it.
That's what I just said.
I mean, we do have an existing document in place that is a workable document for now,
Right.
but I would prefer to not rush this.
So we can plan on meeting, our
That's
next
my
meeting
thoughts.
on May 3rd at the select board's meeting.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. All right, I'll get these corrections out to everybody. Did you say May 3rd was the next select board's meeting after next week? Well, if we meet next Tuesday night, we can work on this revision, but these three aren't gonna be here. May
You will
3rd,
have,
we will.
yeah, we have a quorum.
Right.
You'll have copies of the documents, right? In your comments.
Next, what time is the board of selectmen meeting next week? At 6?
6 o'clock.
So if we meet at 4:30 next Tuesday night, that will be fine.
What's the date?
The 7th.
Tuesday is
19th.
19.
I was wrong when I gave you those dates.
All right.
Looking at April.
The next meeting after that will be
Oh,
the 30th.
okay.
Yeah, and then we'll make the 3rd.
When I said that was Memorial Day, it's.
I'm gonna get out of here.
All right,
We'll be back to that.
we have a motion to adjourn till next Tuesday night at 4:30.
Next Tuesday, 4:30.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Who made the motion?
I did.